The Nets picks at 21 and 22 are in the books. It's Noah Clowney. It's Dariq Whitehead. Sean Marks stands pat for the rest of the draft, at least at the time of this recording. We're going to break down everything that went down on draft night, what things look like for the future for the Nets, what more could be coming. We'll get into all that. But first, the theme music.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo. All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, those Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am Doug Norrie, the owner-operator of DFSR.com. If you need some projections, FanDuel, DraftKings, you know the drill. Go to DFSR.com. No Adam Armbrecht on the show. He was putting in work at Barclays Center, covering the draft over there for the Locked On Nets. Just getting some NBA, doing some hobnobbing among the NBA elites. My man is on his way home from the city now, so we'll be rolling this one solo. I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. We are in the books on picks 21 and 22 for the Brooklyn Nets. Had to wait to get there. Had a lot of just stuff happen in the meantime. Had stuff not happen in the meantime. Tons to talk about. We're live over on YouTube. If you're listening on the podcast, make sure you're subscribed over on YouTube because you know this thing is going live. We'll be going late into the evening, rolling through questions on YouTube as well. We got to get into everything that everything that rolled through with the NBA draft, what the Nets were concerned, because this was a fun one, man. If you were sweating this down, if you were kind of waiting to see what the Nets were going to do, speculating what they were going to do, hoping that a guy might fall all the way into the Nets' lap, looking at you, Cam Whitmore, there was a little bit of sweat down to the end, but ultimately the Nets at pick 21 take Noah Clowney, the Nets at pick 2 take Dariq Whitehead, and away you go into next season with the picks. They do not end up trading Royce O'Neal for a pick this year. They do not end up trading Dorian Finney-Smith for a pick this year as of this recording or next. Well, I mean, probably the ship has sailed on the first round by the time this recording is out. So those are the three pieces that we were kind of waiting for over the course of this draft was, would the Nets package it together to move up? Would they stand pat at 21-22? Would they unload one of the excess of wings that they have on the roster right now, maybe to get some more draft depth? Some of those things happened and some of those things didn't. And ultimately, I think the Nets can walk away from this. I feel like we're going to walk away from this one as sort of like a decent grade, but kind of incomplete where the Nets draft is concerned, because it just doesn't feel like everything that they wanted to do or maybe needed to do for this team happened here at draft night. Maybe the opportunities didn't arise. I mean, there were other teams that had guys on the move. No one of the Dorian Finney-Smith or Royce O'Neal ilk that really ended up moving, but there was plenty of draft just trading and mechanics that went on. Nets were not involved in any of that, but they did take numbers 21 and 22 with the draft. And to say this was a chalk draft for the Nets, I mean, I think halfway there it was and halfway it wasn't. We'll go through each guy. We'll talk about a little about the positives and negatives with each on the show today. We're going to have plenty of time to break these guys down in detail. We have already talked about both Noah Clowney and Dariq Whitehead on the podcast before. These were two guys that were projected sort of in the Nets range, and we had done longer segments on both of them in the past, which I'd encourage you to go back and listen to. They were posted a couple of weeks ago when we were doing more in-depth draft coverage. So go back and listen to that. I'll recover some of that ground here and some of the new things that we've learned about each dude. We'll start with Noah Clowney. He goes at 21, coming out of Alabama this year. He was a guy that he was 5 to 10 minutes before the pick. I basically said it's a lock that they're going to take Clowney. All the signs were pointing this way. He was mocked here in a couple pretty well-placed mock drafts, including Jonathan Gavoni over at ESPN, who seemed really confident. If you read his final draft piece right before the things went out, Clowney was a guy that he felt pretty confident with. He projected, I think, Nick Smith Jr. as the second pick, but Clowney, he had differing language with both, because the Clowney one was like, I forget the exact wording, but it made it very clear that he felt pretty confident with the Clowney call. And it just seemed like it was going that way as the draft wore on. I think the one hitch in this would have been, had Cam Whitmore fallen past the Rockets at 20, then maybe the Nets have to start thinking about it. But that ends up not happening, and that doesn't end up falling into their lap. So it was really just, to me, feeling like Noah Clowney, and that's what ultimately happened here. So coming out of Alabama, big dude, 19, not even 19 years old yet, projects to be more of a sort of traditional power forward type, 6'10", a little over 200 pounds. The body's going to probably end up filling out here as time goes on. One would hope. I don't know what the exact wingspan is. I want to say 7'2", but I'll just double check that as we're rolling here, because I'm not sure that was 7'3" wingspan. And the length that he has is something that, that's something that you can't really teach in a guy coming out with this sort of athleticism, and this kind of length is not a teachable skill. It's just an inherent trait. And Clowney is probably, at least coming out of college right now, is his strongest trait, is that he's just a pretty big dude with a close to NBA ready body, but probably not all the way there yet. That does already do some things on the court that will have him be able to probably see minutes early, but there's going to be some development here too. Development's going to be a theme of what we're talking about with this draft. We kind of knew that was the direction. We thought that might be the direction the Nets went here based on some of their coaching staff hires, Kevin Holly, Ronnie Burrell, and the like, that was looking very much like a staff that was going to that was being put together specifically to develop younger players. Adam and I speculated that the Nets might go sort of halvesies on this one upside dude, one younger upside guy, maybe one more established play now kind of guy. They really went upside for both picks. I'm totally fine with it. I think this is the mode ultimately that they should be in, is that just try to get younger, have some upside. You're drafting in the 20s. There's going to be holes in these guys' games or question marks. And there are question marks around Noah Clowney, right? So what he does well right now, he can get it after on the defensive end. He projects to be able to get into a switching scheme relatively early, I think, and be able to play on that side of the ball. He rebounds the ball pretty well for his size. I've read around 8 rebounds a game at Alabama. He probably at some point, well, I'll get to the shooting in a second. He does have good defensive instincts if you watch the tape. They're not incredible, but it's fine. The wingspan helps him make up for a lot of that. He's not incredibly athletic, but I think that overall he should be able to keep up with the speed of the NBA game. And like I said, on the defensive side of the ball, which is where he's going to make his bones early, that I think we can probably project a decent player there. Motor is fine. You feel good about that. Ultimately, I think that's where they're going to land on that side of the ball. Look, any guy like this that's in this wing or higher, we're gonna call him a wing, call him a traditional 4, whatever you want to end up, small ball center, probably not all the way there yet on just his overall sort of makeup. The key here, unless you're just a straight up center, is that are you going to be able to shoot? That is the key and question for almost every guy that sits around this section of the draft with these measurables that isn't going higher in the draft, is most times because are they going to be able to shoot at the NBA level? And he's not the only guy that falls into this range with those question marks, but he definitely has question marks around it. The good news is, if you read up on him and you watch some of the tape on him, the shot form does not look terrible. It comes in a little bit low, and the release is a little bit slow. If you watch overall tape, like it takes him a decent amount of time to get through out of the pocket and into the windup, as we'll say. But the form itself does look okay. And that is something that probably does project pretty well. If you read up on different kind of scouting reports about him, is that most people feel pretty good about the mechanics. Now, whether the mechanics turn into a really good / great 3-point shooter, which he kind of needs to be, we'll see about that. That's just going to be a time will tell kind of situation. If it does, Nets hit big here. Nets hit big with Clowney if the shooting comes around. If the floor spacing can be there for Clowney, then we're looking at steal territory at 21 in the draft. If it doesn't come around, we're talking about a guy that's going to have trouble staying on the court. And that's pretty much the whole story. I mean, there's other parts of his game. Alabama ran some pick and pop stuff with him that it looked okay at times. They wanted to get him into some two-man actions that were okay. I don't think that's going to be his bread and butter at the NBA level, but it's nice to see that he could do it. It's just going to be, at least for now, and at least the cliff notes of this draft pick for where it stands with Noah Clowney, is if the shooting comes around, then the Nets did great here. I trust with this player development piece that the Nets are putting together that this is going to be a major focus. And if it is, like I said, we're going to be talking about Noah Clowney as a steal in the draft. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. But if it doesn't, then we're looking at a situation that maybe, we'll be scratching our heads a little bit, because 28% from three at the college level, 65% free throw shooter. It's a little scary when you're talking about ways to project out the shooting, but still super, super young. And you really just can't teach someone a 7'3" wingspan with athleticism. So that's where we're going to land on Clowney right now. Going to get into Dariq Whitehead, going to get into the moves that Marks, as of right now, didn't make here at the draft. And it looks still a little time, I suppose, but probably not going to happen tonight. Going to talk about all of that in a second. First, going to tell you about our friends over at Bird Dogs. I'm wearing the Bird Dogs right now. It was easy call. Got in the shower before the draft. Knew I needed to freshen up. Need to shave the head a little bit, and threw on the Bird Dogs because I knew we were going to be in for a long night. Knew I needed to feel comfortable. Knew I needed to have a versatile short to get me up and down the stairs between the office and just the television when we're doing some draft stuff. That's where Bird Dogs come in. Stretch khaki shorts designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and leg, giving us the sculpted look. They do the exact same thing as Lululemon, but they fit way better. They just fit better, man. I just tell you, you've heard us talk about Bird Dogs on the show before. These are just the most comfortable shorts I've ever had, the best fitting shorts I've ever had. And it's just that simple. If you order through Bird Dogs right now, you're going to get the Yeti style tumbler. I'll try to hold it up on screen for all you those on YouTube. Going to send that right along with it. You'll get one of those for free. I'm in the Bird Dogs every single day. It's the easiest read we've ever done, just because these are the best shorts I've ever worn. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA for a free Yeti style tumbler with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. You're going to grab that tumbler. You're going to grab yourself a pair of shorts. It's all good to go. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We promise you. All right. After Noah Clowney comes Dariq Whitehead out of Duke, freshman. Lots to talk about here with this pick. Again, not all that surprising. Was way more confident with the Clowney pick, but Whitehead was one of the group of guys that Adam and I felt pretty good about projecting into the Nets range. This is the guy that, if you were listening to the podcast before the show, we went through about 7 guys that we thought could land in the Nets range. Whitehead was one of them. He had been projected to the Nets in some spots. There were connections between him and the Nets that were not basketball related, which we'll get to in a second. So I just wasn't shocked to see it. I wouldn't have bet my life on it or anything going into the draft, or even when that pick was coming up. I thought it could be OMP. Maybe it was going to be Chris Murray. There were some other guys still on the board for the Nets that I thought they could go into. But hearing Whitehead's name called was, if you've been following this stuff, you've been listening to the podcast, you've been following Nets just draft coverage throughout the last couple weeks, you knew that this was a guy that could land in the Nets, and they ended up doing it. Freshman coming out of Duke. Let's go through the negatives first. Okay, the negatives are that he just had foot surgery, and the foot surgery seems to have impacted, the foot injury originally seems to have impacted his overall play at Duke this year. There were struggles at Duke. The athleticism didn't look like it was there. The stats just really weren't there at all, just from a scoring or a burst standpoint. There was flashes of it at times, but overall, it just wasn't amazing at Duke. Now, this was coming off of him being one of the most heralded high school players in the country, that if this draft had been done sort of like with no college coming straight out of high school, and it had been done last year, Dariq Whitehead would have been very near the top of the draft. Like, he was just that high among prospects coming out of high school. Foot injury kind of submarines it. And the numbers at Duke from just an overall statistical standpoint and an eye test too, if you watched a lot of it, just really weren't there. He did shoot the ball still very well, 43% from 3 and 3.5 threes per game. Only played less than 21 minutes a game at Duke. But again, a lot of this could be attributed to missing part of the season with the foot injury to start and just sort of never really recovering. The reason we know he never really recovered is because he just had a second surgery to fix to fix the foot, with the feeling is going to be he's going to make a full recovery and be ready for training camp. This was news that had come out well in advance of the draft. The connection with the Nets is that the doctor who did this surgery is the Nets team doctor, is the Nets team orthopedist. This is where Adam and I, we said this right before we went on when Adam was over at Barclays and we were just running through our final notes before the draft. We said, if the Nets took Dariq Whitehead here, we were actually going to feel pretty great about it, because we knew that they were going to be as close to the medical situation as any other team because the doctor's already in-house for them. This is, I think, a very, very good sign. This is another one of those situations where we do the draft 1 year ago. This guy goes way higher, way higher. There's no doubt about it. That's not a hot take. That's just is what it is. The foot injury, it's a little scary on the foot. I'm with you on this one. If you're worried about foot injuries, it's not a soft tissue injury. It's not a tear. It's not anything like that. It looks like it's correctable. And if you feel confident in that process and you feel like that piece of his game is the sort of the burst and everything else is able to come back, this is, again, an absolute steal in the draft. These are not safe picks. Noah Clowney and Dariq Whitehead do not fall into the safe pick category by any stretch of the imagination for the Brooklyn Nets. Chris Murray is like a version of a safe pick, right? Like those guys are sort of safe picks. Pajemski, who went to the Warriors, who we talked about, safer side of pick, right? Like maybe not tons of upside, but you kind of know what you're getting out of the box. Noah Clowney, Dariq Whitehead do not represent that. They represent swings on guys who project, if things land right, to have a ton of upside. Whitehead projects to be big enough to play, sort of this combo guard, maybe like a 2 or a 3, maybe switching between a 2 or the 3. We'll probably have to wait to see exactly where he lands positionally. 6'6". He's got, I think, a 6'9" or 6'10" wingspan. Let me just double check. I thought I had these up in front of me, but I didn't. I'll have to get the wingspan when I come back to this. But overall, projects to be like an athletic playmaker that, if an on-ball scorer, he can get after it on defense. The length for him, 6'10" wingspan. So 6'6", 6'10" with a 6'10" wingspan, probably, like I said, is going to be a shooting guard / small forward type with more athleticism than some of the guys that the Nets have in those positions right now. But just with a little more on-ball ability. If he's going to be able to make shots off the dribble, just kind of a guy that I'm not sure right now, from an archetype standpoint, the Nets really sort of have on the team right now. This is a little bit different. He's got a good feel for the game. He's going to be a pull-up threat. Like I said, the one thing that didn't go away from him at Duke was the ability to shoot threes. Those were still there. 43% is elite shooting, and you can just see it. You can see it in the tape when he shoots. The dude is just going to be a good shooter. The only questions are going to be here is if is he able to recover from the injuries that hampered him overall. That's really kind of the biggest knock on him, right? Maybe he's not the most athletic guy. The most crazy on ball dude. Maybe he's not going to be he's not going to project to be a point guard or anything like that. He doesn't have the handle for that, but he basically brings almost everything else in a healthy version that you would want to see on the court. So feel pretty good about this. I'm going to reiterate, and we're going to talk a lot about Clowney and Dariq. We're going to talk about these guys all summer, right? Where they project. We'll do deeper dives on them. This is just more of an instant reaction on these dudes. So there's plenty of meat on this one in terms of how much we're going to talk about where these guys fit, what it means for some of the other guys on the roster, how we might project out some of the rotations. We'll obviously be following along with the recovery from the foot surgery and all this. But I do think that these picks represent, I don't think they're safe picks. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay to not be safe here. The Nets are not in a position to just kind of just be safe and go for older dudes who you kind of know what they're going to get. I don't think that was what they should have done, and they didn't. Neither of these guys are 19 years old, right? This doesn't feel like what Sean Marks has maybe done all the time in the past. These dudes are young. These guys have upside sort of built into them. They have they have measurables that you like to see. They have athleticism that you like to see. They have parts of their game that they maybe haven't fully realized yet because they're young, and these things can come around. So overall, we'll get way more into this as the summer goes on. We're gonna slice and dice this every single way possible. We're gonna get a ton more news about I'm sure the Whitehead stuff. He wasn't even in the building at Barclays because he's recovering from surgery. Wasn't even invited. I don't know if he wasn't invited because they didn't think he was going to go into that range, or if just because he's recovering from foot surgery. Obviously, Noah Clowney, he was there, pretty quiet dude. But we're going to get a lot more into these guys as the off season rolls on. So, but my final thoughts on this before I get to just some of the other Mark stuff and just draft stuff overall is that, look, are we jumping out of our seat with these picks? No. Were a lot of the guys that we kind of talked about, a lot of the guys we talked about at this place were kind of gone at this point. Like I don't know if I don't think there's many like huge misses behind where the Nets drafted. I know maybe some people maybe sort of fell in love with a couple guys on the board here, like dudes that guys that went behind the Nets, like Chris Murray. We talked about him. We weren't really interested in that pick. Olivier Maxence Prosper, we could have seen them take him. I think once they took Clowney, they just weren't going to take OMP, right? Maybe it's a coin flip between those two guys, and they liked Clowney better. Those guys are, somewhat similar in their game. Some people like Ben Shepherd. I know some people really like Nick Smith Jr. in this spot. Maybe you're feeling like that's the guy the Nets should have taken, some point guard depth. I don't know. There was plenty of holes in that game. I wasn't so excited what I saw with Nick Smith Jr. I think I'd probably rather take the upside on Whitehead. I think the Whitehead has significantly more upside than Nick Smith Jr. That's just my opinion. So plenty of ways that we're going to get into this over the course of the summer. Want to talk a little bit about what happened here or didn't happen with the Nets for the rest of the draft. We'll talk about that in a second. First, I'm going to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. If you're trying to get tickets for the game, for the theater, for the concert, you don't want it to be stressful. You want to just get out there. You want to get your tickets. You want to find a good deal. You want to know where you're going to sit. You want to know you're going to go to the event, and you want to go have fun. Buying tickets for your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. That's why you got to get into Game Time. Game Time is the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets for every sport, music, comedy, theater near you. They got killer deals on last-minute tickets. They got the best price guaranteed. You can stop stressing out about tickets. Start getting hyped for the fun that you're going to have. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals and tickets right up to the day of the event. Grab those flash deals: football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets. Lowest price guaranteed. And you're done with that, go and head over to our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. All you're doing on Prize Picks is you're going against their player projections. You're not trying to figure out salaries. You're not trying to just like finagle a bunch of different players into one lineup or anything like that. You're just going more or less on the player projections. You can win up to 25 times your money. Just pick 2 to 6 players, figure out if they're going to score more or less than that projection. With NBA, it's easy. It's points, rebounds, assists, blocks, steals. MLB, you get the strikeouts, you get the RBIs, the runs, the home runs, obviously, missed the biggest one. And they got PGA. They're going to have football going crazy here. When that comes around the fall, Prize Picks entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's super easy. They have safe and fast withdrawals. They're currently operational in over 30 states plus Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. All right, closing this thing out. Still, if you see me turning my head a little bit, it's because I got the alerts going here. Don't want to miss anything. Obviously, the draft is still going on as we're recording. And like I said, our good friend Adam Armbrecht is making his way back from the city after putting in work over I just saw a Damian Lillard thing come in here, but I don't think that has to do with the Nets. Putting in work in the city, and this is the one situation where you like to maybe double up with your podcast host, because you want to be able to monitor what's going on in the draft, and then also be able to talk about what happened at the draft at the same time. But that's all right. We're going to roll right through it. So other pieces of this draft that we thought did or were, didn't happen, but we thought could happen. Obviously, it was much talked about, or much. It was reported going into the draft that the Nets were looking to deal, or were at least or out there asking for prices on Royce O'Neal and Dorian Finney-Smith. We already know that they have, a bit of an overflux. They have too many wings, as you can say. I'm losing my brain. I've been into this draft thing. I've been drafting here for too long here. We're about, hour 6 of this, just kind of covering this. And so I'm losing my mind a little. Overload. Whatever. They have too many wings. So they was talk that they were thinking about trading Dorian Finney-Smith and Royce O'Neal. According to Zach Lowe, the asking price was a lot. We don't end up knowing what that is. It's probably something like a first round pick. Nothing ends up happening there. They don't make any trades. Those guys are still on the roster right now. You thought they might be able to unload one for maybe some draft compensation to a team that was looking for it. That doesn't end up happening. Not that shocked. If you were watching the draft and you kind of saw the teams that were operating in and around this range, there were a few that you thought might want to bite on a trade, but not tons, right? Like, think about the teams that were operating just before the Nets in terms of overall picks, right? Teams that would have thought about getting out of their pick in order to, add wing depth or something like that. No one in the top 9, right? Like, there's just no chance. All these teams are still rebuilding. The first team you really hit like that is Dallas at 10, but Dallas is trying to get off money. As evidence, they trade out of a Davis Bertans contract just to basically swap picks at 10 and 12 with OKC. They moved down 2 picks in the draft. They end up getting their guy anyway in Derek Lively, and they get off that kind of crazy bad Davis Bertans contract. So that wasn't a team that was going to trade away picks to bring in more money. So that one really wasn't going to make sense. The rest of these teams like Toronto and New Orleans, Atlanta, like Atlanta's trying to trade DeAndre Hunter. They got wings of their own that they're trying to trade. Maybe you talk yourself into the Lakers wanting to do it. They end up taking Jalen Hood-Schifino. So they weren't going to go. Maybe they don't want to keep putting money on their books either. Couldn't see the Heat doing it. Maybe some people talked about the Warriors, but then they add Chris Paul here, and it just doesn't seem like that's a total direction they're going to go. So it's like I wasn't really seeing where a trade was going to materialize for the wing depth that the Nets have. Now, could it happen here in the offseason? Maybe, right? Like, this isn't over yet. We still have free agency to get through. We still got the Damian Lillard situation to get through. There's a ton of stuff here. So I don't think we can lock in that Dorian Finney-Smith and Royce O'Neal are going to be Nets by the beginning of the season. But, and maybe Marks just was driving too hard of a bargain, right? Like, you can ask for anything you want, but it just doesn't necessarily mean anyone's going to say yes. And I don't know, what's the market for guys like this? Is it first round picks? I was always a little skeptical of that, even though it was mentioned last year that that's where they wanted to go. But I was always a little skeptical of, like, are Dorian Finney-Smith and Royce O'Neal going to get you first round picks in this day and age? Like, I don't know. I just didn't really see it happening. And I definitely wasn't seeing it once you looked at the teams that were above the Nets in terms of draft picks here. So that doesn't end up happening. The other, look, we'll see what happens. I'm not exactly sure what those guys' market is. I don't think it's the worst thing to bring them back here and just kind of play it out and see what happens during the year. Maybe their teams are desperate for 3-and-D wings sort of near the trade deadline, and you're able to grab something for them then. That might be the Nets' best course of action. I'm not really positive, but it kind of maybe seems the way it's going to go. The other little subplot that happened during the draft, which was kind of interesting, was Cam Whitmore, man. Just dropped and dropped and dropped. He was projected really in almost every sort of what I'll call real and in-depth mock draft that you read, was basically top 10 in every single draft. Not 8, 9, 10. I think the lowest I saw him was maybe like 12 or something like that. But it was really like in the 8, 9 range almost every time for Cam Whitmore. And it just got away, man. Like, he just kept falling and falling and falling to the point where Adam and I were texting. I was like, man, can we just have another Cam on the team here? Is this going to go all the way? And especially when the Lakers didn't do it. I mean, it makes sense that the Rockets would only draft for upside at that point. This guy's just fallen, 11 spots too far. But we were sitting there, and I thought the Nets would be put into something of an interesting situation if he was to fall one more spot, because I don't think he would have been a guy that they were really targeting, but it would have been nearly impossible to pass up on him at that point. But the Rockets take him at 20, and that ends up being it. But it was a sort of precipitous drop for Cam Whitmore, and was kind of looking like one of those situations like, oh my gosh, is this guy who is sort of like a universal top 10 pick with there wasn't like a ton of stickiness there. Like if you read a lot of the stuff beforehand, it did reference that there was a wide range of outcomes on Cam Whitmore, but no one had that range into the 20s, right? Like it was wide range, something between 8 and 14 or something like that. So for him to fall an additional 6 to 7 spots off the worst case outcomes was looking pretty crazy. So he ends up going one pick before the Nets. I thought it would have been interesting if it landed all the way there, if Marks and company would have stayed strong with probably who they had just completely eyed here. Because there was talk that the Nets were going to move up in the draft just to maybe make sure they got Clowney. It was like that's how much they liked Clowney, was that they kind of wanted to ensure that was going to be their guy, and that they would have been willing to move up in the draft to make sure it happened. They ultimately don't need to. Now you can say to yourself, well, they didn't need to because no one else was going to take him. I think he probably would have gone into the next couple of picks anyway. Whitehead, I'm not sure about. Like Whitehead, I could have seen if the Nets don't take him there, maybe he makes it to 30. Like there's maybe too many question marks for other teams to really, really feel good about it. So pretty wide range of outcomes. The Whitmore thing would have been a fun one. Ultimately, it doesn't come to pass. Okay. Going to break out of the regular podcast here. Stick around a little bit in live. Got a ton of people here in YouTube live. Really appreciate everyone. If you have questions, I'll try it when you're here. When you're rolling solo, it's a little tougher to manage the questions and the responses. But if you put in Locked On Nets and have a specific question, I will do my very best to answer it. In the meantime, if you are on the podcast feed, make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Nets on YouTube. We ran a bunch of stuff, hours worth of live stuff today that just don't go onto the podcast feed. So make sure you are subscribed over there. We get to this part of the podcast. Adam is always the one with the quotes from the great American poets. I'll just say Adam Armbrecht, one of the all-time great poets. And we will be back next week and in a second on YouTube talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball. All right. Post-game, post-draft, live on YouTube. Much appreciate everyone that has come in to hang out and mix it up here. Fun night in the NBA. Always fun with the draft. Like I said, my head's spinning a little bit trying to keep up with all the movement, trying to project out like just to give you a little insight into what Adam and I do during this. Like there's a few moving parts. Just bang my microphone. Few moving parts. Like obviously Adam's at Barclays. He's running through all the media stuff, trying to get in to talk to as many people as possible, getting up on the media side. And then during that time, like during the draft, when you do this kind of thing, what you're trying to do is actually just make your best guesses about who they're going to pick, so that you're locked and loaded with opinions ready to go right out of the gate. And there's some network stuff that you'll see on the feed. It did some network interviews about the Nets picks, and you got to just kind of be locked and loaded on about these picks. So the entire time you're watching the draft go, and sort of just the regular fan stuff, right? Like you're watching the draft go and you're trying to figure out who the next guy is going to be. And then you got to make sure you can just be, really well versed on these dudes by the time it comes around. Luckily, like I said, with Clowney, kind of saw that one coming, so was pretty much ready for that. And with Whitehead, we were pretty much ready for that one too, because we thought that could be the case. So if you got some questions, I'll do as many as I can here while the energy level stays high enough as we get later into the evening. Let me just star a couple as we go. All right, sorry here. I'm just going to take 2 seconds here. Put in Locked On Nets into the thing. If you have a specific question or something that I can put up, I'll grab as many of these as I can. I see a couple in here. Okay. So, all right, this one's an easy one. Who do you think the Nets are going to grab in the second round? Haven't even thought about this one yet. Just to be perfectly honest with you, all of our time was into who the Nets were going to take in the first round. Having 2 picks meant that we had to go a little bit deeper with all these prospects because they were at 21 and 22. The range of players that they could have taken, like, I'm not saying this is not a complaint, but just as a comparison, right? If you're locked on Pistons, let's say, or locked on Rockets, it's like, hey, there's gonna be like 4 dudes. There's gonna be 4 guys that we're gonna end up talking about, right? Like, and you want to do you got to do your due diligence on everybody when you're picking around. When you have 2 picks in this range, it's like, hey man, this could be like 15 different guys, like 20 different guys by the time it's all said and done. It's way narrowed down by the time it gets to the draft. But even going into today, let me count how many guys that Adam and I put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 14 guys that we and I'll go all the way out to probably these other 5 too. So I'll go like 19 guys that we saw within the Nets range of outcomes within 72 hours of the draft, right? That's just, that's a lot of ground to cover. So long story short, who are the Nets going to take in the second round? I have no idea. No idea. We'll cover that one as they, as those picks are made. J-Man J, great friend of the podcast here. Is Marks overvalued and ultimately overplayed his hand with Royce and DFS for the draft, similar to him overpaying, playing, not trading Curry at the deadline? It sure feels like it. I some of these questions, some of these like non-moves, I do scratch my head about a little bit. Like we went ballistic with the non-Curry trade last year, and look, maybe there's not a market. I don't know, right? It feels like someone probably could have talked themselves into Seth Curry at the trade deadline last year for something, and something would have been good enough at all, right? Because he's just going to be out in free agency and he's not coming back as the Nets this year. This Finney, like if he's just holding the line on Royce and Dorian Finney-Smith, like it's a little different between the 2 guys because Royce O'Neal is an expiring after this year and he doesn't make a ton. So maybe you think, okay, expiring at the deadline, that'll fetch you something, especially if he's playing well. Maybe you like him enough that you want to sign him to a low-level contract coming back. Like, I don't know. I mean, Finney-Smith is under contract here for another 2 years with a player option on the 3rd. So that situation strikes me as a little different. Like there might be a little bit more time overall to make a move on DFS. So I do see them as a little bit different. But at the same time, I do wonder, like, sort of like why they're all on the team. But if you want to, I don't mind lumping those question marks all together with Curry, and they're not the same player with Curry, O'Neal, and DFS because, yeah, I just don't know why some of these trades weren't made, and those were all like sort of like very tradable contracts. Whitehead is not a top 7 pick. Well, Whitehead wasn't a top 7 pick. He was a 22 overall pick. And so maybe I was missing the context of that one. So, here's a go. Is there any reason to watch the Nets next season? Of course, baby. Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, probably going to re-sign him. Noah Clowney, Dariq Whitehead, plenty of guys. Cam Thomas, maybe he gets to play. Maybe we see him actually come and play. Maybe, there's plenty of reasons to watch the team. This is probably tongue in cheek a little bit. That's all right. But I think there's going to be plenty of reasons, especially too, if they're going for a little bit more of a youth movement here than what we've seen in the past with these 2 picks. Whoever they get in the second round, we'll see what happens to the guys like David Duke Jr. If they end up making decisions on some of these dudes. Obviously, we mentioned Cam Thomas. I think there's going to be a lot of reasons to watch it. Do I think the Nets are going to be like amazing next year? No. I don't think they're going to be, but that doesn't mean we stop watching, baby. I thought I clicked on one here. Who do we think the Nets might bring in as a backup point guard? This is a good question. I am not sure about this one. The free agent stuff out there is pretty bleak. People had some dreams about Tyus Jones walking through the door and maybe the Nets trading for someone like him to sort of be a facilitator, maybe even a guy who could start. That obviously is out the door now. I mean, he goes to Washington. I don't think Washington's going to give him up. I think that they'll probably just end up keeping him. Point guards that are on the market, I mean, like that could be affordable. I'm not really sure, actually. Russell Westbrook. We kind of joked about that before. Fred VanVleet, they're not going to go after him. It's going to be too expensive. I mean, you got guys like Derrick Rose, too old, right? Totally shot. Pure point guard types. I mean, no one's going to want to hear this. The point guard Nets probably want to be the point guard is Ben Simmons, right? Like that's probably the guy they want to be the point guard. Whether I think that he's going to be the actual point guard, I don't think that's going to end up happening. But I'm sure the Nets are holding out some hope. He's going to be on the team. It's very easy for us to all forget him. So it's probably Ben Simmons. And I totally get why nobody wants to hear that. I see someone wants to take Gigi Jackson at 51. I'd probably co-sign that, even though there was just massive question marks around sort of like why he fell so much. And but I would almost guarantee he's going to be available at 51. So sorry, I was just reading a Shams note there. I mean, I bet you Gigi is available at 51. That dude fell like an absolute rock over the course of this draft cycle. But I think that there's enough tools there for sure. It just seemed like the interviews went just so poor. So I'm not really sure what to think on Gigi there. Do I think the Nets start any of the rookies? No, I don't think any of these guys are going to start. I don't think Clowney or Whitehead are going to start anytime soon. I mean, maybe like late in the season, spot stuff, if possibly, but these guys don't project to be NBA starters out of the box right now. It's okay. They're not even 19 years old. And I think that's just totally fine. I could see this clash. Obviously, a huge OG here of the show. Much appreciated, Clash. Do we move DFS for a 2024 first round pick? I just don't think the market's there for these guys. I mean, maybe people see the 24 draft is pretty weak and maybe they're not too worried about it. I think these are probably now headed toward trade deadline dudes. I could be wrong about that. There's all these teams that there are still definitely teams that need wing help. I wouldn't mind kicking these picks to the future if you think that they're going to, if you think that the Nets just aren't going to need the guys anyway. But I've always thought that the asking price for first rounders for these guys was too tall and too steep. But kind of got clapped back at a little bit when I said that before by in the old Twitter sphere by people whose opinions I respect, but it does seem like it's playing out that way. Okay, I think I'm going to get out of here. I can feel myself losing a little steam here at the back end of the draft, and I want to make sure that I have a clear head because we're going to get back into this starting next week. Someone asked me if Cam Thomas is going to start next year. I don't think so. And someone says Gigi has character issues. Sounds like Cam Thomas. I don't know. I don't think there was the same exact reasoning behind why they drafted. And I've always been a little confused about the Cam Thomas thing. We talked about that plenty of times on the podcast before. All right. Going to get out of here for the evening. Much appreciated everyone that jumped into YouTube. Much appreciated that everyone's been riding with this on YouTube, over on Twitter, everything we've done. It's been great. Draft is awesome. These are just super, super fun evenings. It's just fun, man. Like, it's just fun to watch all the chess pieces sort of move around the board. It's fun to try to predict what it's going to happen. It's fun to try to figure out what the team's going to do and just be happy about it or sad about it or pissed off about it or, jump for joy about it. Like, that's just it's to some degree, the NBA has sort of figured this out. They make this stuff almost as exciting as the game sometimes. And that's kudos to the NBA for figuring out a way to really just keep the intrigue going basically all year round. But the draft is a really, really fun time. Okay. Going to jump out of here for the evening for my podcast partner, Adam Armbrecht, who put it in over at Barclays. For myself, Doug Norrie, give us both a follow on Twitter at Adam Armbrecht, at Doug Norrie. We'll be back again next week talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.